What you gonna do, brother, with all the members in you?
Hey, what is going on all my fellow godlies and Gears of War enthusiasts around the world? I am Vance, bringing you another episode of the Gears of War 5 God Build series. This time, we're covering the Siren of the Cog Army, Nomad. I gotta be honest with you though, I really didn't like this class in the very beginning. In fact, it's one of the last classes I leveled up as a result of it, because it's just really not good in the early levels. It kinda slacks, it kinda needs to get carried. But if you make it up to like level 12, 13, 14, that's when it really starts to shine, especially when you max out some of these mod cards that I'm going to show you. But this class has some really untapped potential. It's really good utility despite the fact that it's in the assault class. So let's just read the description here. It says, the Eye of the Storm. The Nomad is a deadly mobile sniper class that uses fear to create space for the team. I agree with the latter portion of the description, I just don't agree with the former. Now I know there's some players who are going to swear by the Markza and say that it's really good, but it's really not that good. Yeah, you can build a mobile sniper class out of the Nomad and it'll work, undoubtedly, but it's never going to work as good as the mod setup I'm going to show you. The only problem with the Nomad is the fact that you can't come into here and switch out your loadout. Change the Markza, swap it to a Lancer or a Retro Lancer. Either one of them will work, because if you don't do that, all you have is a Boltok, and that's all you can use to assassinate people. And you're probably wondering, Vance, how can you use a Boltok to assassinate people? Well, I'll tell you here in a second. So your ultimate ability says that you put enemies into a state of fear. Enemies under fear cannot attack and they will retreat. It does not affect bosses. Sure, it doesn't affect matriarchs and swarmax, flocks, or carriers, but it does affect wardens, and you can't argue that they are a boss, because why else would they be named during a boss wave? It affects everyone that it needs to, essentially, because all the enemies that it doesn't affect, you don't really get bothered by those types of enemies anyway. The only time they're really a nuisance to you and your teammates is when they're pushing too hard and they're invading your base along with all the other infantry. And Coalition really needs to get on this, man. They really need to prioritize some type of algorithm that prevents the bosses from getting in there aggressively with the infantry. Like, we really need to be able to clear out the infantry before we start tackling the bosses. And fuck the Wakatu. So the passive ability here is deal double damage to enemies under fear. This is going to be extremely helpful with this build setup. And before I even get into it, man, let me tell you, it is extremely useful in Escape. It's pretty helpful in Horde, but in Escape, it is so good. You have got to take a look at how well this build synergizes with itself. So the first mod I'm using in this setup is the Fearsome Aura, and this is just going to increase your fear radius. Nothing special. But then we get into Execution Shield, which is 80% damage resistance while executing, and you gain Stim, and this is only level 4. So I can level it up twice to max it out. And if you actually go into the progression of this mod, my next level, it's going to give me 90% less damage while executing, and 90% stim. Meaning that the next time I max that out, it's going to be 100%. So it's just as good as the veteran execution. You won't be taking damage while you're executing. And in those earlier phases, if you have your mod card up to level 4 like I do, you do take a lot less damage, and oftentimes when you finish the execution, your life is completely saved because the stim will get you back up to full health, and it'll send everything in this immediate proximity running away, assuming that the thing that's shooting you or hitting you is immediately in the area. Because if it's not, and if it's kind of out of the range, then you'll take some shots, but as long as you survive the execution, you've got the stim, now you can kind of tank those shots. So why is stim useful? If you have armored shot, you will do 55% bleeding damage while you have stim. And again, this is another mod that's not maxed out. I'm one away from being maxed with this because it's a gold card, and therefore gold cards are kind of hard to get. But you'll do bleeding on top of the double damage with the passive. I mean, who doesn't want to be an anchor who does double damage? Except you get to apply bleeding with all of your guns and not just the bolt hawk. So with the assistance of phase, you execute causes fear, and this is basically having your ultimate ability available to you anytime you do an execution. And part of the reason why I'm procrastinating doing a Nomad build for so long is because I wanted to recommend something different for the ultimate ability, because you get access to fear without ever hitting your ultimate at all. But after thinking and thinking and thinking for so long, I couldn't really come up with anything that would be more useful. I mean, I essentially use my ultimate ability as a panic button. Whenever my base is getting too crowded, I run out in the middle of the mayhem and click fear, and even if I get downed while doing it, it still clears up some of that congestion and provides my team a little bit of time to regroup. So that's the most important part. So this is why the bolt hawk is useful. The concussive rounds stun lock enemies. So if you stun lock a drone, it will be sitting there with like stars above its head. And this makes it vulnerable to execution should you get close enough to melee it. If you melee it, you execute it automatically, and then you induce fear because we have that mod present. This is going to be something that you absolutely need in Escape, and it's something that's optional in Horde. Because with Horde, you're just going to start with this shitty loadout that doesn't include a Lancer. But you do have the bolt hawk present, so I would recommend using this mod just until you can get your hands on a Lancer again. So everything here really complements just spamming fear, getting a fear chain started, doing bleed damage to enemies who are under fear because you're capitalizing on bleed damage. Like I said, I know that there's players who swear by the Markza, but I don't like the Markza. It's got too much recoil, the rate of fire is dog shit, it's inaccurate, and it doesn't do enough damage. If it did more damage, I could justify making this a mobile sniper class, but there's other classes that quite frankly do sniping better than this one, and the Markza doesn't even zoom in, so I can't. Either you're gonna buff Markza to make it better, or you're going to add a class selection system, like a loadout selection, so you can change your weapons, because that's really what Nomad needs to be in order to be complete. I will just start up a Horde match and immediately swap out my Markza for a Lancer, because if you're especially if you're playing Jingle Juvies, a Nomad is so useful and can take so much pressure off the team if it gets a fear chain going. I mean, he's borderline invincible against Jingle Juvies. While you're playing Horde, you're probably gonna be wondering what type of perks you want to select. You don't need them. This is the one class that can donate absolutely all of its points to the Fabricator, so all the engineers are gonna absolutely love you. However, if you do feel the need to upgrade anything, I would personally upgrade the health, assuming that you don't have your execution shield maxed out. Other than that, this is a really complete class. I don't have a lot of complaints to make about it. It's quickly become one of my favorite classes to use as a result of how useful this mod setup is in both Horde and Escape. You don't even have to change the mod setup at all. It works for both Horde and Escape, but it really shines in Escape mode because it can save your team's life. There are so many instances where you can activate fear that will bail you guys out of trouble. Like if you're on the helipad and there's too many enemies coming to the gate, you can pull the fear and send them back through the gate. You know, you can execute enemies and they won't attack while they're under fear, so that gives you time for you and your teammates to clear them out. One thing I will say in conclusion about this class is that you should encourage that your teammates, or you should discourage that your teammates chase enemies in Escape. Let them run away. If they don't get baited by that. I know it's very tempting to chase them and finish them off. Don't do that. It will get your team killed. One guy will go down and then another person will go down trying to revive them, and then you'll have to restart. So just don't get into it. That's my expert advice. So if you learn something from this, I would always encourage that you do what I encourage you to do every video, and smash that like button, comment, share, subscribe, do everything I always encourage you to do. And just remember that you can't advance without Vance. And until next time, peace. What? What? I didn't chainsaw anybody? Okay.